The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with tension as Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire stood before the assembled delegates. His blue-scaled hands trembled slightly as he held the datapad containing evidence that would seal his people's fate. Around the massive circular hall, representatives from 47 different species watched with expressions ranging from disgust to righteous anger. "The crimes of the Zephyrian fleet are beyond dispute," declared Chancellor Mordun, her crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. The elderly crystallite's body pulsed with angry red light as she spoke. 3 civilian colonies attacked without provocation, millions of innocent lives lost, entire ecosystems stripped bare for resources. Kethvar's throat went dry. He had hoped somehow that the evidence might be questioned or that diplomatic immunity could protect his people. But the holographic displays floating above the council floor showed undeniable proof. Surveillance footage from the attacked worlds revealed Zephyrian warships bombarding defenseless settlements, their distinctive energy signatures impossible to fake. "We demand justice!" roared General Thrak of the Ursine Confederacy, his massive frame rising from his seat. "The Zephyrian invasion fleet must face trial for their war crimes." "Trial?" scoffed Counselor Vexty, her serpentine form coiling in agitation. "What trial do mass murderers deserve? They should be executed immediately." A chorus of agreement rippled through the chamber. Kethvar felt his knees weaken. His people had made terrible mistakes. Driven to desperation by their dying homeworld and dwindling resources. But the fleet commanders had acted without authorization, their hunger for conquest overriding all moral boundaries. Now his entire species would pay for their crimes. "The Galactic Accords are clear," Chancellor Mordun continued. "Any species that engages in unprovoked aggression against civilian populations forfeits their right to exist among civilized beings. The Zephyrian Empire is hereby condemned to exile in the outer void, their ships stripped of faster-than-light capabilities, their people banished to drift in the darkness between stars until their natural extinction." The vote was swift and merciless. 46 votes for condemnation. 0 against. 1 abstention from a nervous-looking delegate who couldn't bring himself to meet Kethvar's desperate gaze. The Zephyrian ambassador collapsed to his knees, knowing he had just witnessed the death sentence of his entire civilization. In the weeks that followed, Galactic Council enforcement fleets surrounded Zephyrian space. The condemned fleet, consisting of nearly 2 million souls aboard various warships and support vessels, was herded toward the designated exile zone. Their FTL drives were systematically disabled by Council technicians, leaving them with only conventional propulsion systems that would take centuries to reach the nearest star. Captain Zareth of the flagship Eternal Storm watched helplessly as the last of his ship's jump drives were deactivated. Around him, his bridge crew worked in grim silence. They all understood what this meant. Their children would die aboard these ships. Their children's children would die here too. Only the most distant generations might possibly reach another star system, if they managed to survive the journey at all. "Sir," Communications Officer Velen reported quietly. "Message from the Council Enforcement Commander. We have 72 hours to reach the exile boundary before they open fire." Zareth nodded wearily. His people had brought this doom upon themselves, but that knowledge provided no comfort. He thought of his daughter Nira, barely 8 cycles old, who would never see a planetary surface again. The weight of command had never felt heavier. The exile fleet began its slow journey into the outer void, their conventional engines pushing them away from the last traces of galactic civilization. Behind them, Council ships maintained a careful distance, ensuring no Zephyrian vessel attempted to turn back. The condemned fleet's destination lay in the emptiest region of space, where no stars shone and no worlds offered hope of sanctuary. As the days passed, despair settled over the ships like a suffocating blanket. Some crew members spoke of honorable suicide rather than facing the slow death of exile. Others proposed desperate plans to fight their way back to civilization, knowing such attempts would only result in immediate destruction by the Council's vastly superior firepower. But on the bridge of the science vessel, Deep Seeker, something unexpected happened. Senior researcher Kithara was monitoring long-range sensors when she detected an anomaly. A small fleet of unknown vessels was approaching from the direction of the galaxy's outer rim, moving on an intercept course with the exile convoy. "Captain Torvan," she called to her commanding officer. "I'm detecting 5 ships approaching our position. Configuration unknown. They're not broadcasting any identification codes." Captain Torvan frowned as he studied the sensor readings. The approaching vessels were clearly artificial, but their design was unlike anything in the galactic databases. They were relatively small, showing no obvious weapon signatures, yet they moved with surprising speed and precision. "Are they Council ships?" he asked. "Negative, sir. These designs are completely unfamiliar. Their energy signatures don't match any known technology." Word of the mysterious ships spread quickly through the exile fleet. On the Eternal Storm, Captain Zareth watched the tactical display with growing curiosity. The unknown vessels had positioned themselves directly in the path of the Zephyrian convoy, making no aggressive moves, but clearly intending some form of contact. Then, for the first time since their condemnation, the exile fleet received an incoming transmission. But this message didn't come from the Council enforcement ships trailing behind them. It originated from the mysterious newcomers ahead. "Attention, Zephyrian vessels," came a voice, speaking accented but understandable Standard Galactic. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earthship Defiance. We are representatives of humanity, recently arrived in this galaxy. We have monitored your situation and wish to speak with your fleet commanders." Shocked silence filled the communication channels. Humanity was a name that appeared in no galactic databases. These beings claimed to be from something called Earth, a world no Council member had ever heard of. Yet they had somehow learned Standard Galactic and positioned themselves to intercept a condemned fleet in the emptiest region of space. Captain Zareth found his voice first. "Unknown vessel Defiance, this is Captain Zareth of the Zephyrian Fleet. We are under Council condemnation and exile. Any contact with us violates galactic law. You should withdraw before the enforcement fleet considers you accomplices." A moment of silence followed before Captain Chen responded. "Captain Zareth, we are not members of your Galactic Council, and we do not recognize their authority over humanity or our actions. We wish to discuss your situation. Will you accept a diplomatic meeting?" On the trailing Council ships, alarms began sounding. The enforcement commander, Admiral Klextar of the Hegemony Navy, stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 5 unknown ships had appeared from nowhere and were now communicating with the condemned fleet. Worse, they had explicitly rejected Council authority. "Communications!" Admiral Klextar barked. "Open a channel to those unknown vessels. Demand immediate identification and compliance with Council directives." The response came swiftly and was broadcast on open frequencies for all to hear. "This is Captain Chen of the human vessel Defiance. We do not recognize your authority and will not comply with demands from beings who condemn entire civilizations to death. Humanity stands ready to offer sanctuary to any who seek it." The words hit the exile fleet like lightning. Sanctuary. After facing certain doom, these mysterious humans were offering hope. Captain Zareth felt his heart racing as he processed the implications. But could they trust these strangers? And what power did they possess to challenge the mighty Galactic Council? Admiral Klextar's crystalline features darkened with rage. "Unknown vessels. You are interfering with the lawful enforcement of Council justice. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." "Admiral," Captain Chen replied calmly, "we have studied your so-called justice. Condemning millions to death for the crimes of a few commanders is not justice. It is genocide. Humanity does not stand by and watch genocide occur, regardless of who authorizes it. The comm channels fell silent as both fleets processed this unprecedented challenge to Council authority. In the depths of space, three forces now faced each other: the condemned Zephyrians, the Council enforcers, and these mysterious humans who had arrived from beyond the galaxy's edge. Captain Zareth realized that whatever happened next would reshape the fate of his people and possibly the entire galaxy. These humans had just declared their willingness to defy the most powerful organization in known space. Either they were incredibly brave, incredibly foolish, or incredibly dangerous. As sensor readings continued to analyze the human ships, disturbing patterns emerged. Despite their small size, the vessels showed energy signatures that defied conventional physics. Their hulls reflected scanner beams in ways that suggested materials unknown to galactic science. And most unsettling of all, they had arrived at these exact coordinates with perfect timing, as if they had been watching the entire situation unfold. Who were these humans? Where had they come from? And what kind of beings would risk everything to help a condemned people they had never met? The answers to those questions would determine whether the Zephyrian exile would end in salvation or if it would escalate into something far more dangerous for everyone involved. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the Defiance, watching the massive Zephyrian fleet drift through the void ahead of them. 2 million souls aboard ships designed for war, now reduced to flying coffins by the Galactic Council's cruel judgment. Behind the exile convoy, she could see the Council enforcement fleet maintaining their threatening distance, weapons powered but not yet firing. "Admiral Thompson sends his regards," reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez from the communications station. "Phoenix Wing is in position on our starboard flank. The other ships report ready status." Sarah nodded grimly. 5 human ships against a Council enforcement fleet that numbered in the hundreds. On paper, it seemed like suicide. But humanity had learned hard lessons during their own dark period of exile, and they had spent decades preparing for moments exactly like this one. The diplomatic channel crackled to life again. "Captain Chen," came Captain Zareth's voice, heavy with exhaustion and desperate hope. "Your offer of sanctuary, what exactly are you proposing? The Council has disabled our FTL drives. We cannot escape this region of space." "Captain, that's where you're wrong," Sarah replied. "We've been monitoring Council enforcement procedures for some time. Their technicians disable your jump drives by removing key components, but they don't destroy your ship's fundamental navigation systems. With the right equipment and expertise, those drives can be restored." A long pause followed. When Zareth spoke again, his voice trembled with emotion. "You would help us repair our ships? But the enforcement fleet would never allow it. They would destroy us all before permitting our escape." "The enforcement fleet," Sarah said carefully, "is about to discover that humanity doesn't ask permission for doing what's right." On the Council flagship Retribution's edge, Admiral Klextar paced his command deck like a caged predator. His tactical officers had been analyzing the human ships for hours, and their reports made no sense. The vessels appeared to be constructed from materials that shouldn't exist, powered by energy sources that violated several fundamental laws of physics. "Sir," reported his science officer, "I'm detecting massive energy buildup within the human fleet. Whatever they're planning to do, it's going to require enormous power." "Weapons?" Admiral Klextar demanded. "Unknown, sir. The energy signatures don't match any weapon systems in our databases. But the scale suggests something far beyond conventional armaments." Admiral Klextar's mandibles clicked with agitation. He had commanded enforcement operations for 2 decades, and never had anyone dared to interfere with Council justice. These humans seemed completely unaware of the military might they were challenging. 5 small ships against the most powerful fleet in the galaxy? It would be over in minutes. "Open a final warning channel to the human vessels," he ordered. "This is Admiral Klex Tar of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system or we will consider you enemy combatants and act accordingly. This is your final warning." The response came immediately, broadcast on all frequencies so that every ship in the area could hear it. "Admiral Klex Tar, this is Captain Sarah Chen. Let me explain something about humanity that your intelligence files apparently missed. We spent 300 years fighting among ourselves before we learned a simple truth. When someone commits genocide, stopping them isn't a crime. It's a moral obligation." "We are not committing genocide," Admiral Klex Tar snapped. "We are enforcing lawful punishment for war crimes." "You're condemning 2 million people to death for crimes committed by a few dozen commanders," Sarah shot back. "If that's not genocide, it's close enough, and humanity doesn't negotiate with genocidal regimes." What happened next changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The 5 human ships suddenly blazed with energy unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. But instead of weapons fire, they projected massive protective fields around the entire Zephyrian exile fleet. The energy barriers shimmered like aurora, deflecting the Council's scanning beams and creating an impenetrable shield. "Impossible," breathed Admiral Klex Tar's science officer. "Sir, those barriers are operating on principles our physics can't explain. They're not just energy shields. They're somehow manipulating space-time itself." But that was only the beginning. As the Council fleet watched in disbelief, the human ships began launching thousands of small objects toward the Zephyrian vessels. The projectiles moved with impossible precision, each one targeting a specific ship and somehow penetrating the protective barriers without disrupting them. "They're attacking the exile fleet," shouted a tactical officer. "No," the science officer corrected, his voice filled with awe. "They're repairing them. Each projectile contains replacement components for the disabled FTL drives. They're fixing every ship simultaneously." Captain Zareth felt his ship vibrate as one of the mysterious projectiles attached itself to the Eternal Storm's hull. Within minutes, his engineering teams reported that their jump drives were not only functional, but operating at efficiency levels beyond their original specifications. "Captain," his chief engineer reported with wonder in his voice, "these humans didn't just repair our drives, they improved them. Our jump range has increased by 300%, and our power consumption has dropped by half." Across the exile fleet, similar reports came in from every ship. The humans had somehow restored and enhanced the FTL capabilities of 2,000 vessels in less than an hour. But more than that, they had given the Zephyrians something they had lost: hope. "All Zephyrian vessels," Captain Chen's voice rang across the communication channels. "Your ships are now fully operational, but before you jump to freedom, you need to understand what humanity is offering you. We don't just offer sanctuary," she continued. "We offer a choice. You can flee to the edges of space and try to rebuild alone, always looking over your shoulders for Council enforcement fleets. Or you can come with us and help build something better. A alliance of free worlds where justice means protecting the innocent, not condemning the masses for the crimes of a few." Admiral Klex Tar could feel his carefully ordered world collapsing around him. "All ships, prepare to fire on the human vessels. They have committed an act of war against the Galactic Council." But before he could give the firing order, his tactical displays erupted in alarm. The human ships were moving, but not in any way that made sense. They seemed to fold space around themselves, appearing and disappearing across the battlefield in patterns that defied every principle of physics. "Sir!" his weapons officer called out in panic. "I can't get a targeting lock. They're not traveling through space. They're somehow stepping outside of it." The human ship Defiance materialized directly beside the Council flagship, so close that Admiral Klextar could see details of its hull through the viewports. But his weapons couldn't target something that appeared to exist partially outside normal space-time. "Admiral," came Captain Chen's voice, now speaking directly to his ship. "I want you to understand something. This isn't a battle. This is a demonstration. Humanity has capabilities that your council can't match, can't understand, and can't counter. We could have destroyed your entire fleet in the first few minutes. Instead, we chose to show mercy." "What? What are you?" Admiral Klexitar whispered. "We're what your people could become," Sarah replied sadly, "if you learn to value life over power. We're what the Zephyrians could become, given a chance to grow beyond their mistakes. We're what every species in this galaxy could become, if they chose cooperation over domination." The Defiance vanished from beside the flagship and reappeared at the center of the Exile fleet. Around them, the Zephyrian ships powered their newly enhanced jump drives, preparing to follow their mysterious saviors to whatever destiny awaited. "Zephyrian fleet," Captain Chen announced, "you have a choice to make. You can use your restored ships to flee into exile, or you can come with us and help build a better galaxy. But choose quickly. The Council fleet won't remain stunned forever." Captain Zareth didn't need to consult with his fellow commanders. The choice was obvious. "Captain Chen, the Zephyrian exile fleet accepts your offer. We place ourselves under human protection and guidance." "Then welcome to the Alliance of Free Worlds," Sarah replied. "Transmitting jump coordinates now. Stay close to our ships during the transition. We're going somewhere the Council has never been and can never follow." Admiral Klextar watched helplessly as the human ships created what could only be described as a tunnel through space itself. The Zephyrian fleet followed their saviors into the impossible passage, disappearing from sensors in a cascade of energy that his science officers declared should have been impossible. In less than 3 hours, everything had changed. A condemned fleet had been saved, Council authority had been openly defied, and a new power had announced its presence in the galaxy. A power that commanded technology beyond galactic understanding and possessed the will to use it for protection rather than conquest. As the last echoes of the space tunnel faded, Admiral Klextar realized he would have to report the impossible to the Galactic Council. Humanity had arrived, and they had just rewritten the rules of galactic politics with a single act of defiance. The Council's absolute authority was no longer absolute. And somewhere in the unknown reaches of space, a new alliance was being born that would challenge everything the galaxy's rulers thought they knew about power, justice, and the limits of the possible. 6 months after the rescue of the Zephyrian fleet, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, humanity's first permanent installation in this galaxy. Through the massive viewport, she watched Zephyrian engineers working alongside human technicians to construct new defensive platforms. The sight filled her with pride and hope in equal measure. The station itself was a marvel of human engineering, built using dimensional folding technology that allowed it to exist partially outside normal space. From the outside, it appeared no larger than a small asteroid, but inside, it contained cities, shipyards, research facilities, and agricultural zones capable of supporting millions of inhabitants. "Sarah," came Admiral Thompson's voice from behind her. She turned to see the graying commander approaching with a datapad and a concerned expression. "We've received another intelligence report from our scouts in Council space. The situation is deteriorating rapidly." Sarah accepted the datapad and scrolled through the report. What she read made her stomach tighten with worry. In the months since humanity's intervention, the Galactic Council had become increasingly authoritarian. 3 more species had been condemned to exile for minor infractions. Trade restrictions had been imposed on dozens of worlds that questioned Council policies. Several member species had begun requesting secret meetings with human representatives. "They're scared," Sarah observed. The Council's power was built on the belief that resistance was impossible. We shattered that illusion in 3 hours. It gets worse, Admiral Thompson continued. Our deep space monitors have detected massive fleet movements throughout Council space. They're consolidating their forces for something big. Sarah handed back the datapad and gazed out at the Zephyrian workers again. Captain Zareth's people had adapted to their new circumstances with remarkable speed. Their natural engineering talents, combined with human technology, had produced innovations that surprised even humanity's best scientists. The Zephyrians had found purpose in building something positive rather than conquering others. How many species have made contact? Sarah asked. 47, Admiral Thompson replied, all seeking some form of alliance or protection. The Altarian Republic sent a full diplomatic mission last week. They're being hunted by Council forces for refusing to surrender their mining rights to a hegemony corporation. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. This was what they had expected when they first intervened. Humanity's rescue of the Zephyrians had sent a message across the galaxy. Resistance was possible. Hope existed beyond Council authority. But it had also painted a target on humanity's back that was growing larger every day. Contact Captain Zareth, she decided. It's time for the Alliance Council to meet. We need to discuss our next move. An hour later, Sarah found herself in the Alliance Council chambers, a circular room where representatives from 6 different species sat around a holographic star map. The Zephyrians were represented by Captain Zareth and Chief Engineer Kythara. The Altarian delegation included Ambassador Veltar and General Thexan. 3 other species that had recently joined the Alliance sent their own representatives. The situation is clear, Sarah began without preamble. The Galactic Council is preparing for war. Our intelligence estimates they're amassing the largest fleet in galactic history, nearly 50,000 ships from every member species. Ambassador Veltar, an elderly Altarian whose purple skin showed patches of stress-related discoloration, leaned forward. Captain Chen, my people are grateful for humanity's protection, but we must ask, can you truly stand against such overwhelming force? The numbers are beyond comprehension. It was a fair question. The Alliance fleet consisted of fewer than 3,000 ships, including the rescued Zephyrian vessels and the small fleets of newly joined species. Even with humanity's advanced technology, the disparity seemed insurmountable. Numbers aren't everything, Chief Engineer Kythara interjected. Her work with human technology had given her insights that surprised everyone present. I've been studying the human ships for months. Their capabilities are not just advanced. They operate on fundamentally different principles. They don't fight in space. They fight with space. Captain Zareth nodded agreement. During our rescue, human vessels appeared and disappeared at will. They manipulated space-time like other species manipulate metal and plastic. Traditional tactics are useless against such abilities. Sarah appreciated their confidence but felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Humanity had intervened to save the Zephyrians because it was the right thing to do. But that action had started a chain reaction that could lead to galactic war. Millions of beings across dozens of worlds now look to humanity for protection from Council tyranny. There's something you all need to understand, Sarah said carefully. Humanity's technology comes with a cost. We developed these capabilities during our own period of exile and struggle. We learned to manipulate space-time because we were forced to survive in regions of space where normal physics break down. But using these abilities requires enormous energy and risks that we're still learning to manage. She activated a section of the holographic display, showing a recording from humanity's arrival in this galaxy. The images revealed massive tears in space-time, energy storms that lasted for months, and spatial anomalies that had taken years to stabilize. Every time we use our most advanced capabilities, we risk damaging the fundamental structure of reality itself, Sarah explained. We're not gods. We're refugees who learned to harness dangerous forces out of necessity. And now we have to decide whether the survival of free worlds justifies the risks we'll need to take. The council chamber fell silent as representatives from each species absorbed this revelation. They had assumed humanity possessed some natural superiority that made them invincible. Learning that human power came with cosmic-level dangers changed everything. "What are our alternatives?" asked General Thexan, a massive Altarian whose cybernetic implants clicked softly as he processed the information. "The Council will not stop with military victory. They intend to make examples of every species that has joined the Alliance. Our worlds will be stripped of resources and our populations enslaved or eliminated." Before Sarah could respond, alarms began sounding throughout Haven Station. Admiral Thompson's voice echoed through the communication system. "All stations, this is Admiral Thompson. Long-range sensors have detected an incoming Council fleet. Estimate 52,000 ships approaching from multiple vectors. Time to arrival, 18 hours. The Council members looked at each other with expressions of fear and determination. This was the moment they had all known was coming. The Galactic Council had finally decided to end the Alliance threat with overwhelming force. "Captain Chen," Captain Zareth said quietly, "my people owe you our lives. Whatever the risks, we stand with humanity. If this is to be our final battle, we will face it with honor." Similar declarations came from each species' representatives. Despite learning about the dangers of human technology, they chose to stand together rather than surrender to Council tyranny. Sarah felt a surge of emotion as she looked around the room. These beings had chosen freedom over safety, hope over certainty. They deserved better than being caught in the crossfire of humanity's conflict with the Council. "Then we fight," she decided, "but not the way the Council expects. Admiral Thompson, prepare the fleet for emergency deployment. Signal all Alliance vessels to fall back to defensive positions around Haven Station." "Sarah," Admiral Thompson's voice came through the communicator. "Our fleet is strong, but 50,000 ships—" "Admiral," Sarah interrupted, "we're not going to fight 50,000 ships. We're going to do something the Council has never seen before, something that will either save this galaxy or change it forever." She turned to address the Alliance Council one final time before the battle began. "Captains and ambassadors, in the next few hours, you're going to witness capabilities that humanity has never used before. What you see may be frightening, but remember that we do this to protect innocent lives and preserve freedom." "What are you planning?" Ambassador Veltar asked. Sarah's expression grew grim as she considered the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. "We're going to show the Galactic Council what happens when you force humanity to choose between justice and safety. We're going to demonstrate why some lines should never be crossed, no matter how much power you possess." As the Alliance fleet prepared for battle, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. Humanity had spent centuries learning to harness forces that existed beyond normal space and time. They had always used these abilities defensively, carefully, with maximum caution for the safety of reality itself. But the Council's massive fleet represented more than a military threat. It represented the determination of an authoritarian regime to crush any hope of freedom in the galaxy. Sometimes, Sarah realized, the greatest danger was not in using terrible power, but in failing to use it when innocence itself was under attack. The final confrontation was about to begin, and its outcome would determine whether the galaxy's future belonged to those who sought power over others or to those who believed that freedom was worth any price. In 18 hours, 52,000 ships would arrive expecting an easy victory over a small Alliance fleet. Instead, they would discover that humanity's true strength had never been tested in this galaxy. They were about to learn why humanity had earned the right to walk between stars and why some species should never be pushed beyond the point of mercy.